Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a potentially incredible pattern change that will be coming into almost at Thanksgiving, late November into early December. And their models have been showing this for quite a few days now. I have already made several videos about this, but we have new data that came in today. And let me just tell you that the data that comes in each day, I'm looking to see if maybe, they are disengaging with that thought of very cold temperatures and snow for December. But in fact, they are just intensifying the rhetoric every single time there's a new update. So we have some really exciting stuff to talk about. As many of you know that watch this channel, I'm a winter weather lover, so this type of stuff gets me really excited. And yeah, we've had a really warm fall, so it's going to be quite a shock for many, and there are going to be a lot of things to track. Even prior to this pattern change, there could be many big storms, winter storms, severe weather outbreaks, and then once this pattern change hits, there will be a lot to talk about, obviously, as well. So let's start talking about it. I want to start off by looking at the EPS 46-day outlook. So EPS, if you're not familiar with it, it is basically the European family of weather models. There's, I think, over 50 of them, all combined into one graphic, so they're kind of averaged into one look, and it goes out to 46 days. So this is really good for pattern recognition. They have been pretty good in years past of kind of determining whether or not there could be a colder January outbreak. I remember in 2021 they did a really good job with that cold outbreak that froze Texas down to the bone there. So this time they are showing obviously cold across the United States, but into early December. So let me just show you and take you through this. So right now we are dealing, and by the way, each time you see a little change of weather imagery, that is 1 day, because this is such a large time frame. It's not 6 hours or 3 hours, it is 1 day. And you can see at the very top here it says Wednesday 26th of November. So as I put this forward, keep an eye on that. So yeah, heat, and we're continuing to see that heat. The only area where there will be a little bit of cool weather by late November is going to be the west, the northwest, as these systems, these strong low pressures, are going to continue riding out into the eastern United States. Out ahead of them, there are going to be a lot of warm weather, a lot of severe weather, and behind them, there's going to be the cold and potential for snow. Notice, however, how quickly this changes as we get towards December. This cold air, in order for it to get such a strong anomaly of almost -6, -7 degrees, even -8 pockets right there, this far out for such a large set of models is truly extraordinary. And look, across the eastern United States, this cold air spills into those areas. So this cold may only be for a little bit across the northwest and southwest Canada. If you're across the east, don't expect it won't reach you, because it does in a big way. You could see by December 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, it is cold. Now notice that there's a little bit of a dwindling, right? So again, at this point, we are over a month out, and the weather models are showing a little bit of cool, more of a cool bias and warm bias, so probably some sort of brief pattern change, maybe the room or setup for a large winter storm somewhere in here as we get rid of some of that really cold air. But look, as I put this closer towards Christmas time, we don't see the warmth revamp, which a lot of these models do in a long range. If they don't really have a direction, they just choose the warmth, because that's usually, they're kind of biased towards that. Notice that as we put this towards the 21st, 22nd of December, we see the cold air re-intensify, and re-intensify to quite a degree. We are now at this point a month and a half out, so by meteorological standards, it's almost la-la land. And some of these weather anomalies are showing -4, -5 degrees, so pretty good confidence for another really strong cold shock of air around that Christmas time frame. So there's going to be a lot of chances for cold, a lot of chances for snow, and we will be tracking all of this. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the accumulated precipitation. So this is the same group of models that I just showed you, and this is now showing us where they think and how much precipitation will fall. So notice that we are right now stuck at November 28th, so this is through the end of the month. And this is pretty much in line with what the operational models like the European and GEFS show. We essentially are going to be seeing a lot of west coast systems, very powerful low pressures, spring into the mountainous northwest, and that will be bringing a lot of precipitation and snowfall, especially with the later systems as we get more of that cold air building across the west. But as this system, because of the lack of cold air, as the system moves and maroods its way through the west, mountainous northwest, it comes by, and also the southwest, it's not just the northwest, it comes through the Gulf of Mexico here, and by the time it reaches Texas, Oklahoma, it springs into a system of more of a spring-like characteristic. On some of the earliest ones, because of how warm it will be, they won't even have a snowy backside. It will just be a lot of potential rain and severe weather here. And you can see that is kind of showing us where the models still I guess September or late November, where they think the cold air and warm air divide line will be, because in meteorology, wherever you have the baroclinic zone, the area between a cold air mass and a warm air mass, that is where storms ride through. And in this case, you could see the cold will be more refined towards the north and west, while the storms producing tons of moisture in this warm environment could be severe weather makers. So dangerous systems underway. I'll definitely be making videos on that. However, as we get towards December, things notably change. So notice that we start seeing, as it goes a little further out, it kind of averages the lookout. Notice that we see continued precipitation being added to the eastern United States. So it's not like if there's going to be an absence of precipitation. And without an absence of precipitation in cold air, that means that there is going to be a lot of that falling as snow. Individual storms, that's impossible to track. But look, for example, around the 14th, 15th of December, there's a surge of moisture across the Midwest there. With below average temperatures, that would probably indicate some sort of a snowstorm, either producing a lot of snow across the upper Midwest, or maybe if it's a little colder further across the Ohio Valley. That will all be determined as we get closer in time. And what's interesting is that we see this surge of moisture around that time where the models show a little bit of a moderation in those cold temperatures. So my guess would be we see a really cold wave of air out ahead of it, probably some strong system. In between that, maybe smaller clippers, whatnot, maybe a nor'easter at the edge of it. And then we see a little bit of a warm-up, and in that warm-up, we see a system take place and probably develop somewhere in this area, dropping a lot of snow. And behind that, we see another surge of cold air, but with continued precipitation being added in, meaning maybe it's more of an active northwest flow pattern. And that leads me to my next point. Alright, so now I want to show you the 500 millibar geopotential heights across the North American continent. And this is for that same model group that I was showing you, and for that same time period, except this is a little different because this allows us just to see kind of where the ridging develops, where the kink in a jet stream goes, maybe where potential storm tracks are. The previous image just kind of showed us where it'll be cold or warm. This one gives us a more climatological and meteorological view. So essentially, there's an explanation as to why the blue colors mean cooler temperatures where they are occurring. But for now, for simplicity terms, just wherever you see the blue, there's going to be probably below average temperatures, and wherever you see orange indicating ridging, there's going to be above average temperatures. And notice that as we go into the the late part of November, so for now, the cold air is going to be confined to the western United States. The warmth will be across the east, and with that you could see we have ridging and warm colors. Again, this notably changes as we go into December. We see some of those warm colors disappear across the eastern United States, and we see a ridging, so most likely a pattern, let me set that there, most likely a pattern that consists of a very, very deep trough, and the European and GEFS are beginning to hint at this at their very far end of their forecast period. And most likely some sort of a jet stream causing an eastward or I guess a northeastward progression. So this most likely would mean that this first part of this cold wave would end up being a little warmer for the southeast. And why I'm showing you this is because for the second wave of the cold air, you could see that eventually does move into the eastern United States. But in between, we do see that little warm up, right? You could see those blue colors kind of disappear. But for that second wave, you can see that the cold air is more squarely centered across kind of the northeast there, I guess, of northeast of our viewing area, so the United States, southeast if you're Canadian. And do note that this would probably mean that the Pacific Ocean is somewhat open to moisture flowing in. So this would probably not be as much of massive systems across the eastern seaboard or across the central United States, but more maybe southern sliders, so snow across the southern United States, depending on how cold it gets, or Alberta clippers, which may sound like, oh, that's no snow, it's associated with a system that's moisture starved, but sometimes these systems can combine with southern moisture, especially if it's open, and you can see this does show warmth here towards the south. So essentially, an active pattern which supports not only cold but potentially also snowfall. Now again, this is pretty far out, but the model signals, as I've been saying, have been strong and have been trending towards a stronger and stronger scenario. So a very, 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 very interesting long range outlook here. So now I want to move on to another piece of information as to why I assume December will be very cold and very snowy. This is the Climate Prediction Center 3 to 4 week outlook. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is so you don't think that I am just some sort of really bad YouTube amateur that looks at a weather model and says it's going to be cold. because I may do that sometimes. But in this case, I do have more evidence to back my claim. This is a 3 to 4 week temperature and precipitation outlook that the Climate Prediction Center released today, just maybe 30 minutes ago, as they release it on Friday, every Friday. And note what they have. So this is valid from November 29th through December 12th. And you can see they are favoring pretty much what the model was showing. Very cold air, or at least below average, but for it being this far out, and the Climate Prediction Center using that shading of a color, I've been tracking this since they started making these in 2017. That is pretty aggressive. That is very aggressive, and you can see that they are favoring mainly cool air, and as I was saying, potentially warmer towards the southeast there. Regarding precipitation, you could see it's supportive of a lot of moisture where that storm track would go. So potentially some sort of nor'easter, maybe as far, depending on how cold or how cold it isn't. There could be snow as far as Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin. One area that I would probably favor as being below average precipitation would be maybe the northern area, the North Woods, if you will, Minnesota, Wisconsin, UP. But again, that remains to be seen because individual storm tracks this far out with such a complex pattern are going to be impossible to see. Now, what this doesn't show us is that potential second wave that I showed you in the weather models. Why? Because that's just way too far out, but I thought it would be interesting. And that would probably favor colder air that's a little bit shifted eastward towards the country, and a storm track that is definitely a little different and maybe not as moisture laden, as the Gulf kind of cools with the year, and also as it seems as if the Gulf of Mexico might be cut off from the richest moisture during that time. We'll see though. That is very far out. But you can see so far everything is lining up for a very cold and snowy December. So if you're looking forward towards a white Christmas, you have a pretty good darn chance across the eastern, really just anywhere across the United States this year. So one last thing I want to show you is the GEFS ensemble. So what I showed you at first was the European ensemble that went out to 46 days. Then I showed you the Climate Prediction Center. And now I want to show you what the GEFS, so this is kind of like another major group. The two competing groups are the European and GFS. And the GFS is another group that is pretty accurate. It depends, sometimes the European, sometimes the GFS. And the point is that when you have two of these groups agreeing in a very far out time frame, usually that is a sign that it's a pretty confident and strong signal. So right now we are looking at hour 0, and you can see it's showing warmth. This is what the European showed as well. And as we go towards November 16th, 17th, 18th, the timestamp is at the very far right. You can see it changing there, November 19th, now 6 a.m. We see a little bit of ebbing and flowing. The pattern remains warm till, again, at the very earliest, Thanksgiving week. But do know that slowly but surely we see cold air, cooler air building across the west and northwest, and as we go towards the east and southeast, the warmth remains. Now we are in Thanksgiving week, and you can see that most likely somewhere around this time frame is where we get several big systems kind of, again, between that warmth, between that cold, dropping maybe snow, maybe severe weather, probably both of those around that Thanksgiving week time frame. So a really busy Thanksgiving week that would probably not be good for travel, especially given that Wednesday is the busiest travel day of the year for America. But notice that as I put this forward towards December, we see the cold footprint grow. So just like the European model ensembles, the GEFS agrees. And we keep going further and further out. Notice that signal becomes stronger and stronger and begins moving further and further east. Again, at this point, probably snowstorms, snow systems, Alberta clippers, all of that sort is a very real possibility. Where exactly the coldest air and warmest air line up, that will have to be seen as we get closer in time. Notice this is now the 6th of December, 7th, 8th, 9th. And just like the European ensembles, we potentially get some sort of break around here. Whether or not that's what the GFS is hinting at here or just a loss of confidence remains to be seen. Though you can see the pattern remains pretty cool. And as I really stretch this out into pretty much right before Christmas time, again, it seems like some of that warm air may be coming in, so kind of what the European model is showing, and the cold air gets refined more towards a strip, kind of going from the northwest towards the northeast there. So again, if that would be the jet stream, more or less the path that would be taking, you could definitely see some large system brew up here in this moisture. That's red on orange. I apologize if you can't see that well, but as it rubs against this jet stream, potentially evolving into a really strong system that develops a classic, comma-shaped head of snow anywhere in here, or potentially one of the systems that kind of slides along and brings maybe, heavy snow into the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley and whatnot. So endless possibilities, and we'll have to see as that plays out. But again, the GEFS, along with the European models, supporting a cold and snowy December. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something new. You better get prepared for winter. This one looks, at least for the first part of it, looks very cold across much of the United States, especially the Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast, Upper Plains, the West. Gosh darn it, pretty much everywhere. So stay prepared. I'll keep you guys updated. See ya. Bye.